Brought to you by bedroombattlefields.com, this is the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. It's Matthew with you here, and on this episode, Dan returns. This is part one of a two-part episode that I recorded with Dan. A couple of great conversations, at least in our own opinion, so hopefully you enjoy them too. And like I say, it's a two-parter, so there'll be another episode to follow this one in the very near future. Just a couple of things, hobby-related things to kind of catch up on before we get into my conversation with Dan. The first is just a couple of things I've been doing, bits and pieces. I sort of came to the conclusion this is hardly Einstein level stuff, but because I've been playing a few games recently, I get quite paranoid with the metal miniatures. Like, as much as it's my kind of preferred medium and all the old classics are metal miniatures, playing with them's a different matter. Like, it's great to see them on the table, but I'm so paranoid about chipping them. You know, I've dropped a couple, even though they've got 2 coats of varnish on them. You drop them on like a neoprene mat, shouldn't really chip them, but you know, I end up having to fix them quite regularly, so it makes me quite paranoid. So as much as I'm like not the biggest fan of plastics, I decided to kind of up my plastic collection with a view to having these as like the primary play-in miniatures. So this coincided with me actually wanting to increase my collection of sci-fi miniatures anyway, because I'm playing a lot of Star Squabble at the moment. So I did want to get more options for sci-fi troops. The first thing I picked up was a box of Stargrave Scavengers. And these are from North Star military figures. This is a really good box. It's about, I think it's £22. You get 20 of them that you can build. Really good miniatures, lots of variety. And you know, as much as I find building plastics quite fiddly, I really enjoyed it. They don't go over the top with the detail. Plenty customizable options, but it's not like you're gluing on individual fingertips or that. So the second thing I picked up was the classic Space Rangers, which were available in the 80s or 90s. A pal of mine, he had some of these. They were like big chunky Space Marines. They were originally on like hex bases from what I remember, but now you could buy them on EM4 miniatures, and it's $4.99. You get 5 of them, so it's like just less than £1 each, which is fantastic. And by modern standards, with some of the stuff you see out there, they are slightly soft on the detail, but they're still really good miniatures. They were fun to paint as well, so that's a good batch of plastic miniatures purely intended for playing with. So I'll put a link in the show notes. You could see my photos. I've painted them up and get a wee look at them. Like I say, everything I mentioned today, I'll fire a link into the show notes. So I was working with Josh. We've done, I think we did 5 or 6 painting lessons over the past 5 or 6 months. Josh at the Crown of Command, who does really, really great painting tutorials. So I was able to work with him, and I think I mentioned this on a previous episode. He was watching me paint, and he was able to correct a lot of stuff that I was doing, and I was able to make improvements as well. So that was part of it, was painting these Stargrave Scavengers, and just working with the latest couple of things I did was working with purples, working with blacks, and doing like coats and capes and that. So really helpful. I would thoroughly recommend, like, if you're wanting to, you know, any level of painting, if you're just wanting a few tips or you want to take things to the next level, then Josh is definitely the guy. You could sign up to his Patreon and you get access to those painting tutorials with him each month. I mentioned playing Star Squabble, so that's the rule set that I kind of work away on myself, and you know, I've been working on this for several months now, playing a lot of games with it. I'm pretty happy with it, and I've decided to make those rules freely available for anyone who wants to try it out. You know, I'd be really interested to hear folks, you know, if they play tested it, what they thought of it, if they had any tips or suggestions or feedback or whatever. So I'm going to make that, it's just a short PDF, very skimmable. I'm going to make that available. You'll find it at bedroombattlefields.com/rules. That's bedroombattlefields.com/rules. You'll get the latest copy of Star Squabble. And yeah, if you get the opportunity to have a wee bash at it, let me know what you think. I really would appreciate it. Big thanks to everyone who took part in Santa Night Fever. This was our Bedroom Battlefields community Secret Santa. There was a good 20 or 30, I think, people that took part in this. It's been brilliant to see all the different presents that have been exchanged. Some fantastic miniatures changing hands, and a few folks were opening them live at the Royal Orc event a couple of days ago. So again, big thanks to Mark for putting that together. That was a lot of fun. I wasn't really able to participate because I've got the wee one sleeping like right next door to me through a very thin wall, but I was just painting some stuff and listening into that. So it was really good fun. The people opening their gifts. They played a game of Nightmare as well, the TV show for the 90s. So that was a lot of fun. So that's the Royal Orc. I dare say there'll be another one in the summer, so keep an eye out for that as well. Oh, and speaking of the Secret Santa as well, I need to say a massive thanks to Base out in Sweden. He very kindly sent me some 15mm Samurai Fantasy. They're for Hordes of the Things, I think. So they'll come in really handy for my 15mm projects. Massive thanks to him, like I say, all the way out in Sweden. I didn't ask him to do that. He offered me. I wouldn't obviously have got somebody in Sweden to post stuff to me. But yeah, very grateful for that, Base. Thank you so much. That's very much appreciated. Big shout out as well to Carol at Chicago Skirmish War Games. This will be another link that I'll add to the show notes. So Carol hosted a day at his house recently, a community day where folks turned up and basically did a lot of hobbying together, and he's put up on the Chicago Skirmish War Games blog a lot of brilliant photos and a nice review of that day. So they got together in the morning, they were creating terrain, they brought stuff and basically built terrain together. They had lunch, Chicago style pizza. So apparently in Chicago you get really good pizzas, not to be confused with the Chicago town pizzas that you could buy out Asda's that go in the microwave if you live on this side of the pond. Completely different food stuff, I'm assured, if you could even call those microwave pizzas foodstuffs. But they had a big lunch, and then in the afternoon, a game of Grimdark Future, a big, huge battle, and I think it was 1,500 points per player. And so it looked like a fantastic day. Always great to see these events taking place, people managing to get together in person, creating things and actually getting miniatures on the table and playing a game as well. So like I say, links in the show notes, get a wee look at that, and there's some brilliant pictures to scroll through as well. And speaking of pictures, I put a video on the YouTube channel. We got a photo frame, like a digital photo frame for like family photos, holiday photos, baby photos, etc. But this could be a really good tool for a hobbyist as well, like for display purposes. If you take a lot of good in-game photos or just photos of your miniatures, you could use one of these digital photo frames, and it just goes on a rotation. You could set it to change every 15 or 30 seconds or whatever. And just a really good wee bit of kit. So I did a YouTube video just going over that and showing it off kind of thing, showing what you might be able to do with that if it tickled your fancy. So yeah, digital photo frames as an alternative to display cases maybe, or just a companion piece to your display case if you like. Alright then, that's been enough preamble I think. Let's get into the main event. Here is my latest conversation with Dan. We thought we'd have a wee conversation about storytelling, naming characters and that. First and foremost, Dan, do you do that yourself with your games or your war bands or your armies?
Yeah, it's one of my favourite bits, mate. It's one of the amazing parts of this hobby is the naming, who to name, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, I guess. Who do you start off naming? And how do you name them, and how that might potentially change as you go through the games, and also how you note the names is something, but it is really important. But how about you? I'm guessing because you put this forward as an idea, I guess it is important to you, something you like doing. So go on, kick us off. Do you do it? How do you do it? Do you like it?
Yeah, I've always enjoyed storytelling. I've got a background in fiction writing and that as well, so I've always been a bit of a storyteller, I suppose. And yeah, that it ties in really well with the hobby. You get certain miniatures, and there is something about just who is this? Where did they come from? Why are they here? this is the Cotton Eye Joe lyrics, isn't it? You know what are they doing next?
That's not a lyric.
So yeah. Cotton Eye Joe.
Might have to shout that one.
Yeah. So yeah, it's something that really appeals to me. But what I'm curious with you, Dan, because you get out there and play people that you don't necessarily know. Like you've done a lot of that in the past. So like when you're turning up to a game, I don't know if this will ever have happened, but you're getting this wee guy out the miniatures case, and oh yeah, this is Bob, you know, veteran of 1,000 campaigns.
No,
and then the guy across the table is like, what are you on about? Like, just put it down.
No. Yeah, I very much need to be in an environment that is receptive to the little silly stories. Like the little silly stories are what I enjoy the most, but I also understand that the little silly stories are not something that everyone enjoys. So I think I've got to be in the right company for that to occur. So like I've got names for my A Song of Ice and Fire guys, a lot of them. But I won't ever share them unless I feel like the audience is receptive to the little silly stories. Like I won't ever force that on anybody else, if that kind of makes sense. So the last time I did this properly was playing Kill Team, the previous addition to the current Kill Team. I don't even know, it's so stupid now. I mean, like version 29 we're on now, or whatever. So it was a few years ago, probably 4 years ago, and yeah, I named the main characters in the Space Marine Warband. But my general theme for naming characters is some people are given a name. The most important guys are given a name, and other people earn a name. So in the Space Marine one, I had my Sergeant Bilko. So that is obviously from the old school TV show. You know, Sergeant Bilko. You probably caught that on like Saturday mornings when you were a kid and stuff like that. So I had Sergeant Bilko. But then a couple of other named characters that had to earn the name. So in the first one, I spoke about this a while ago on a previous show. But I had Reggie Reaver. He's a Reaver, Space Marine, and he stabbed. So he had a combat knife. So he only had a pistol and a combat knife, and because he was like proper puny, the Terminator guy who was on my mate's team, he let Reggie get super close because he was like, man, he's only got like a combat knife and a pistol. Because like, you know, Sergeant Bilko had like a decent, like, I think he had like a heavy bolter and stuff like that, right? Or something. And Reggie like just had a pistol and a knife. So I think this Terminator guy was like, ha 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 ha, he's not going to get anywhere near me. I was like, leave him alone. He's going to scratch the paintwork on my Terminator armor. But like Reggie stabbed him in the neck or something and took him down. So then Reggie was like a legend. So what I did was I got one of these. I'll find it out now. Like I can't remember what they're called, but it's like a kind of. I got it here. It's like a circular dial with like letters on, and then there's like a certain tape. It's like a little tape thing that you can put through it. It's like a ribbon, but it's like a plastic ribbon. And then you find the letter that you want, and you press the button, like you can hear it clicking, and it imprints that. It's like a typewriter, but only one letter at one time, and it puts it onto this ribbon, and then it's like self-adhesive. And I got this ribbon the exact same size as the base, and I just typed like Reggie Reaver on the face, and I like stuck it on the side, and then I put the number 1, and then I put that on the back, and it was amazing because when I showed up to the next game, I had Sergeant Bilko and I had Reggie Reaver, and my mate like fucking hated it. And so like Reggie went from like 0 to like hero. And then every game we played in that campaign, Reggie was like running scared. It was like Reggie just like hid in the corner, right? And did literally nothing, just cowered crying in the corner. And my mate would go after him every time because he actually killed this Terminator guy. So it was like he like stabbed him in the neck by accident. We said like he stumbled and just kind of like his knife flew out of his hand and the knife went into this Terminator Lord's neck, right? And then and then my mate hated it so much that it was Reggie Reaver and he had the number 1, so that was his kills, right? So he had number 1 on the back of his face. And every game my mate would just disregard the objectives quite a lot and go after Reggie. Like he had this like vendetta against Reggie, and it was brilliant. And so like with this whole character just derived from the things that were occurring on the table, things that happened on the table, and it's like it just got filled out. So because like he was so puny, he wasn't really going to do much. But then he just accidentally did something. We called it accidentally because it was like, it just kind of happened. And it was like, this guy's a proper wimp. And then he somehow like tripped over and threw his knife, and it went in this Terminator Lord's neck and killed him. And then he just was like, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? And he spent the rest of his career just cowering behind barrels while all these Chaos Space Marines tried to kind of hunt him down. It was amazing. It was amazing. So yeah, I know I've kind of rambled and gone off piece a little bit there, but like, what are my naming conventions? How do I do it? I name one or two who I think are like the big guys, and I give them like silly, stupid names. It's never anything serious. Little silly, stupid names, and then some people earn titles through their acts, and that might be positive acts or it might be something negative. But yeah, that's basically how I go about it, and always silly names. But I only ever share those with the right audience, because if you're trying to kind of do that with people that aren't receptive to it, you just feel a bit silly, I think.
That is it. It's a cool anecdote, that, and it demonstrates another opportunity in the hobby. Not everyone has to do this, but if you don't do it, it's maybe something that you're kind of leaving on the table, no pun intended. But it's like, if we think about chess, like if you and I played chess and I had took your queen with a bishop one game, you wouldn't turn up to the next game thinking, oh, that bishop, like I'm going to get him, because it's like, they're just chess pieces. Yeah. Whereas what was his name, Reggie Reaver, like he's a living, breathing person. Yeah. And even before a dice is rolled, there's already this like immersion on the table. Like, what is he going to survive this time? So it's just another great opportunity. I'm just thinking of this now, so let me pull this document up. I'd created something that I was using in my own games. I call it, so it's a vendetta table. I just threw this together. So this is designed for smaller scale skirmish games, and documents just loading here. So before the start of the game, again, you and I say we're going to play Frostgrave or something, okay? Before the start of the game, we randomly draw a character from each warband. The first one to be selected, so say we've got cards or you roll off or whatever, but the first one to be selected has a vendetta against the second one because, and then we roll a d6. So on a roll of a 1, they made an obscene gesture to them and insulted their mother. On a roll of a 2, they have a price on their head and it doesn't need to come attached to their shoulders. 3 is they once stole something precious from them. 4 is they once held them captive and tortured them for information. 5, they once defeated and maimed them in a previous battle. And 6, they killed their mentor. And then it says a 2, 3, 4 or 5 increases, this is based on my own rules, but increases the wrong party toughness by +1 against that opponent. A 6 increases their toughness by +2, but a 1 decreases their toughness by +1 as they've become a seething mess, recklessly wound up. So again, like this is just some extra flavour if you want it. Like it's an opportunity for something else to be happening on the table.
Yeah, it's like the fantastical is what I play games for. Does that make sense? Like some people call it like swingy games, right? I think a lot of people say it, don't they? They root for the underdog. Like if there's a big football game and Manchester United are playing, Lincoln City, a lot of people want Lincoln City to win. Lincoln City are a lot smaller than Manchester United. If you guys don't follow football, don't follow soccer, so a lot of people root for the underdog, right? And that's kind of like, it's kind of like the same in that instance sometimes, where it's like you kind of want the fantastical, you want the thing that shouldn't really happen to kind of happen, even if it kind of happens against you, because that's what makes the stories, that's what makes the interest. If everything just goes true to form, it kind of gets a little bit boring, doesn't it? So if you got like a stat line, that if the stat lines go true to form, it's interesting to a certain point, but it becomes a little samey. So having that thing about the vendetta where it could potentially go either way, that's an incentive to use it, isn't it? Because it could benefit you either way, right? It could benefit you in a positive way. It could benefit you in a negative way. Is that right?
Yeah.
So it's an incentive to use it. But then it's like, even if you have a negative, you're still going, that kind of still want me to try to do stuff more, because it's like, if I can do it whilst suffering under this consequence, then it's even better. Does that kind of make sense? I don't know. But again, it's kind of similar to what, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, like, if you're, if it's your character who's been judged to have killed the other guy's mentor, and he's really angry and he's after you, and he's got a bonus if he tries to hit you, and you kill him, like that's even funnier, because you're like, exactly, yeah. swing and a miss, mate. So.
Yeah. But it's like, there's lots of games that do that, don't they? There's lots of games that do that, and it's, I think when you get more practiced at it and you get more experience, you get more confident with it, and maybe you're playing with the similar people who get it also. I think you can do that kind of like freestyle, can't you? Like I've always been a big fan of like improv comedy. I was very fortunate when I was little to have a really great drama teacher, and then one of my best friends went to acting school in London when we were both 16, and she got involved in like improv. I love improv. So like when I'm playing Frostgrave, or I'm playing skirmish games, or even sometimes tabletop, mass battle, but not often mass battle, the little improv riffs that you can get are pretty cool. And it's hard because you can't necessarily pick someone out that you'll really riff off well with until you're actually in those games. But when you get somebody that you really can kind of let loose with and just kind of do some improv stuff, it's really good, and it just makes it so much better, because you create those stories on the fly, like you're saying, that vendetta thing. And I think I spoke to Ivan Sorensen a good while ago now, and we kind of talked about stuff, and he talked about 5 Parsecs from Home, sci-fi co-op or solo game, and he also talked about 5 Leagues from the Borderlands, and he talked about how you need to give people just enough to get them going, or just enough to give them an idea, but then them taking steps fills the world out for them. And he was saying that like you need to give just the right amount of support to get people into it without being too prescriptive. Because if you're too prescriptive, it's not interesting for a lot of people, and it gets pretty boring. But yeah, it said it's an art form to give them just the right amount to get them going. But yeah, that's cool, man. So Vendetta is one. So what is this? This is a rule set that you're tinkering around with. So Vendetta is one. Is there any other areas that you've created?
No, the Vendetta table was just a wee feature that I had created. But I did another thing a while back, and it was to do with, let me just find this. It was basically solo. It was event cards for solo or co-op rank and flank battle games. So like you've mentioned it, like big unit games. If we're playing this on a solo or co-op, like we both want to be on the same team and we want to play the game basically. So there's an opponent's army of NPCs. But yeah, so this is a deck of cards. So I'm just looking at random here. So I would draw one event card after a turn. It says Panic. Panic spreads through a unit, causing them to flee from the nearest enemy. So the effectors roll to determine which friendly unit is affected. This unit spends the next 2 turns moving directly away from the nearest enemy unit and cannot attack. So there's like supply line shortage, animosity between your units. One of your units gets targeted. All of your cavalry, there's something that spooks the horses, misinformation. There's all sorts of different like cards here. Like I say, it adds flavour, it adds storytelling, because when you deal with these situations as well, if you get out of it, there's a story there. So
yeah, but it's about, like I said, it's about a framework, isn't it? So I didn't mention this on last show that we talked about, but I think I put it on the Bedroom Battlefields Discord about, in the last game of A Song of Ice and Fire, I had this unit called Pyromancers. So the Lannisters have this unit of Pyromancers, and they throw like wildfire. So wildfire is like the equivalent of like napalm or naphtha or whatever, right? And so they have these like glass vials of wildfire, and they can only throw them very short distances. And with a full unit, you roll 7 dice to attack, and on a 3-up, basically, if you hit on a 3-up, the target is like consumed by this napalm and they die. You don't even get an armor save. But if you roll a 1, something goes wrong and they end up killing themselves. So I worked really hard to get this unit into the right angle, to get them into the right line of sight, to get them the right distance away. So it's short range, so you can only throw it within 6 inches. But obviously, if you're within 10 inches, you're susceptible to a charge, right? So I worked really hard to get this unit into the correct position to be able to throw this wildfire, without being charged themselves, because they haven't got any armor. They're basically just old fellas with these glass vials. And so I've rocked these 7 dice. And I attacked twice because, again, I made it so that I could get 2 attacks without any response. That took a lot of time to do in the game. There's certain instances where you can have 2 attacks with 1 unit in 1 turn, like back to back. And I rolled 14 dice. And out of the 14 dice I rolled 9 ones, and the rest were 2s. So in 14 attack dice, I didn't roll any hits. And I killed 9 of my own dudes, right? And so there was no story in that officially. There was no named characters in that, but just what an amazing thing to happen. And off the back of that, there were so many stories that popped up, right? And it was just like, obviously the wildfire's been tampered with, right? Obviously the glass vials have been, someone's got into our camp the night before. They've kind of sabotaged all of these vials, and your unit didn't attack me when it was maneuvering, not because you couldn't, but because you didn't want to, because you knew that this was going to backfire on them. Does that kind of make sense? And so there was time where we weren't actually playing, where we were just kind of laughing about the craziness of that situation, and we were just kind of like making up some stories on the fly about why that happened. And next time when I went to play the pyromancers, they're going to have backstory. They're going to have some previous and all that kind of stuff, And it's just, I think you've got to have that enthusiasm to make those stories yourself, but you've got to learn how to do that as well, right? It's not something that you can just do. And I think I mentioned about how I would consider myself to be more towards on the continuum of introvert towards extrovert, and sometimes it doesn't come naturally, and sometimes it doesn't come easy. I think company is a big factor in whether you're going to create cool stories, right? I would say.
Our question of the month for you in December is: tell us about your 2024 hobby highlights. Maybe you finally got that miniature you've wanted since 1991. Maybe you leveled up your painting, or finally finished that army, or perhaps it was something on the gaming front that stood out to you most. No matter what your 2024 hobby highlights were, we'd love to hear them. Head on over to bedroombattlefields.com/voicemail to submit, and I need them in by Monday the 30th of December. That's bedroombattlefields.com/voicemail. And now back to the show. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is going to be to do with the person you're playing, isn't it? And whether they're on board, and even like having the confidence to kind of start talking about that, because you could get that funny, like, what are you on about? Response. So do you think it's uncommon for people to go this deep with their storytelling in the hobby, or do you think it kind of just depends?
I think it depends on who you play with, but what I'd say is my experience of playing people, there's significantly more people that aren't that asked about the story than are. So like more people would consider, the more people I've played would consider themselves to be like competitive gamers, or the unknowing competitive gamers, if that kind of makes sense. And I don't know if I've just been unlucky or it was just the people I've met. And don't get me wrong, I've really enjoyed all the games that I've played and stuff like that. But I would say that if I've played 50 people, 40 of them have been more concerned with winning, even if that was subconscious, than creating stories. I would say so. Yeah. Which is fine. But it just makes those people, when you bump into them, that just want to do the goofy stories. But don't get me wrong. But it's a balance though, because I think if you got too much goof, it loses its appeal. Also, it's about striking the right balance. Like Reggie, the Reggie story is a great shout, because it was like we had really good competitive games, but he changed the dynamic of that whole campaign. So it was the first mission in a campaign. His antics changed the entire course of that campaign. And that's what made it amazing. That's what made it really interesting. And there's loads of other stuff that happened in between. But it was like my strategy was to always field Reggie and to always dangle him like bait in front of my mate, because I knew that I'd trigger him. Does that kind of make sense? But we still had great games, and it was still like a good game. It was still a competitive game, but it was a really good balance between the narrative and the story and the goof, but then also the game too. I think it's a balance for sure. Like, because I have played people that are too focused on the silly and on the goof, and it's a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. Like when I was back in the US, I played a game with a guy who just really loved orcs and he really loved goblins, and like he would put on like an orc voice and a goblin voice all the time, which sounds a bit fun and sounds a bit interesting, but it got, I don't know, just got a bit weird and a bit odd. And I don't know, it wasn't.
Yeah, in the second hour when he's still talking like that.
Yeah. So, but I'm not being critical. Don't get me wrong. It was fun and it was interesting or whatever. But yeah, I think you just got to mesh with the person that you're playing with. But what would be your favorite? Have you ever given anyone a name in a war band or anything like that really was awesome? And then did anyone achieve a name through the missions that you really enjoyed and really liked and really remembered?
Yeah, so the most we got into the sort of naming and storytelling in that was Rangers of Shadow Deep. We had our Rangers and their followers, and we were playing that co-op as well. So we got one guy on board. He was like a sort of beastman character. He had a goat's head. We called him Goatsy. I don't know if you're familiar with the early 2000s internet. I don't know if you'd even call it a meme, just a horrendous picture. So we called this guy Goatsy. And by the way, don't Google image that. So Goatsy, on his first outing, he got killed by like a bloat fly. That's Fallout. Just a big fly, a giant fly. The odds were completely stacked in Goatsy's favour, but this fly killed him. So wanted to get the miniature back on the table. So the next game we went with Son of Goatsy, and I think Son of Goatsy got killed by like a giant spider or something. So like we had the Goatsy lineage basically had they were just destined to die to some like really low level creature. So
it's like that. What is it that song about the grandma that swallowed a fly? It's like got killed by a fly, got killed by a spider, got killed by a bird, and it kind of just goes up.
Yeah,
goes up from there. Nice.
I think the last time we had the model on the table, it was like, and written on the warband sheet, it was like, what was it? Third cousin of Goatsy twice removed or something. And yeah, he died. And it did make it as well. You were more inclined to take risks with Goatsy because deep down you wanted it to happen because it kept the funny. It kept the funny thread going.
Yeah.
So it was a self-fulfilling prophecy because then you were like, Goatsy was so reckless, you were just pushing him into combat with everyone and anyone, and then inevitably would get hurt or killed. So
yeah, it's weird.
Good old Goatsy.
Yeah, it's weird how that works, isn't it? It's so cool when you do those stories and you just kind of evolve and develop, and like it's a shared experience, isn't it? So like Reggie and Goatsy, that you'll always have that. If you don't have everything, at least you'll have that. Like we'll always have that. It's like it's like love movies, isn't it? When people break up, it's like we'll always have our weekend in Paris. It's like you'll always have Goatsy. You'll always have that memory of that guy, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, man.
You mentioned the word campaign just a wee while ago, and do you how much do you think this ties in? Because if you've got a campaign, there kind of has to be a story there. Is that a fair enough statement? I mean, we're then moving away, obviously, from the individual character stories to why is this battle happening? Who are these two armies? Why are they here?
Not necessarily. Like I've got Boris Bendyblade. So Boris Bendyblade is like a sergeant at arms in one of my Lannisters unit, and he just got stored incorrectly. So he's like holding his sword aloft. So like there's an elite unit, and they've all got golden armor, and Boris Bendyblade he's like holding his sword aloft, and I stored him incorrectly because he's the only one holding it up high. Everyone else is holding their sword at a regular angle that fits in my storage foam quite nicely. So unfortunately, I forgot to put Boris Bendyblade on the top level of the foam. I put him on the bottom, so all the other foam layers were pushing down on him. And his sword's really bent now. But the thing is that he's gone from kind of like angrily shouting at your opponent to, I'm so crazy that I'll beat you to death with a bendy sword, if that kind of makes sense. So I don't think there needs to be a campaign necessarily. I think there just needs to be history. I think there just needs to be use. Does that kind of make sense? But I've never said to my mate, "This is Boris Bendyblade," but he is Boris Bendyblade to me. But you just got to make it up. You know what I mean? So, but I think campaigns do help. I think when I played my first Frostgrave campaign, what I really liked about Frostgrave, and it's not necessarily explicit and intrinsic to exclusively about Frostgrave, but like having the end of the mission where you do some roll ups. So if they've been injured, how have they been injured? So like, have they got like a sore leg? Have they got a gouged eye? Have they lost a finger? I love that kind of stuff. And what I do when I one of my Frostgrave warbands at one point, a guy got he got an eye put out. So I fashioned out of green stuff like a little eye patch and kind of put that on, and that's awesome. Just being able to kind of add or take away from minis. So campaigns do help, but I don't think it's essential, because I think just playing with the same minis, playing games, they create the stories if you're willing to remember them. But like I said, Boris Bendyblade, he only exists to me. He only exists in my head. I didn't even talk to anyone else about Boris Bendyblade other than you.
It's only me and your psychologist that you've told about, and also the listeners of this podcast. But yeah, no, I wasn't meaning that you did need to do a campaign to tell a story. It was more if you have a campaign, there kind of is a story in there by default, isn't there?
Yeah.
What's going on here? What's the thread?
It helps, I think, doesn't it? I think it makes it more interesting, because I think stories kind of go back. Human beings being interested in the stories, I think, is ingrained into our humanity. I think, in it. If you go back to like cave paintings or sitting around a campfire and passing on your tribe's history or all that kind of stuff, I think we are fundamentally wired to be interested in stories in the same way I think we're fundamentally wired to be interested in music. So anything that can kind of tap into that, I think, is positive, and I think it's something that's desirable, right? But yeah, for sure, campaigns are good. I like campaigns. Especially like campaigns that have growth, that grow and change and develop. I think that they're pretty cool. What's been your favorite campaign experience?
The only really ongoing one I have is, again, going back to Rangers of Shadowdeep. That's the only real time that we played games that were directly tied to the last one. And I really enjoyed it. I want to definitely get back to it. Like, in your how did it work in your experience when you did a campaign? Like, who took the lead on it, and how did you prepare it, and how did you know what was going on? What were the games, the stories?
I think the majority that I've played have always been you have your hand held by the book. So in the most recent ones that I've had, Kill Team, the book holds your hand. So at the end of every mission, you got certain tables to roll on for certain things that happened, and you can call an end to the campaign whenever you want. But there's like a usual 9 to 12 missions, and then you obviously get points at the end of the mission for certain things. So if you kill an opponent, you get a certain amount of victory points. If you achieve certain objectives, you get a certain amount of points. And then you can either play like 9 to 12 missions, and then whoever's got the most points at that point, you call it, or you can have a certain point limit. And then as soon as you get to that, I think campaigns need to be gently handled, because what you never want is one team or one group to start running away with it. If you get a certain amount of gold, for example, for achieving certain objectives, then you can use that gold to reinvest in your warband. There's sometimes one team can run away with it. So I think the idea of campaigns, you need to make sure that you are able to house rule things, and you're able to change things up to make sure that it stays fair and it stays equal. Because there are certain campaigns that are played at certain times where it's like you get run down on the first couple of games, and then it's really hard to catch up, because especially if you've got characters that level up, or characters that get better magic objects and things like that, or you get a certain amount of money for doing certain things, and you can't afford the better characters, or you don't have stronger things. It kind of gets boring real quick. So I'd say that in the campaigns that I've had, it's mostly come from me, to be honest. Which is good and bad. It's good because you get to kind of direct things a little bit more yourself, but I kind of want to be the guy that experiences the awesome campaign that you didn't do. A little bit like someone reading a book to you when you're a kid. Like someone reading the book to you when you're a kid's awesome. Like you don't need to think about it too much. You don't need to do anything. You just absorb it and you just enjoy it. Like watching a film, right? Like if you were to go and watch like Terminator 2, like or Gladiator or a film that you've really enjoyed, when you watch it for the first time on a big screen, it's like dude, I'm just sitting back and just enjoying this. It's amazing. Like people have worked so hard in the background for me, and I just get to sit and bask on it. Like that's pretty good. But yeah, so when I've ran campaigns, it's mostly been something that I've done. I kind of wish that I'd bump into somebody who would shoulder some of that sometimes. But for me, like even if it's not necessarily a campaign, I like consistent play of certain games. Like that's what I enjoy the most. I like consistent play of one games. Like I don't want to butterfly around many different games. I want to hone in on maybe 2 or 3 games that I really enjoy and play them a lot. But they don't need to be like tabletop games either. It's not it wasn't a campaign game at the time, but one of my favorite ever continuous game experiences was playing V Commandos, or what's now V Sabotage, which is like a World War II board game where you complete certain missions with a small group of like commandos, and you have a certain amount of action points each turn. You got to like sneak around the board and try and complete certain objectives. But if you trigger the alarm, it gets very loud very quickly and gets very difficult very quickly. But that wasn't necessarily a campaign game. It was like kind of just like a mission game. But the mate that I was playing with, was playing with a consistent mate, and we were playing on a regular basis. Again, same thing. Like, you're just using certain characters, and they just have the stories. And so there was one mission where there's like a demolition guy, and Demo Dave, his name is Demo Dave. Like, he wasn't called Demo Dave at the start, but he's like a demolition guy, and he just had some really poor luck, and he got stuck on one side of the map, and we had to leave him. Because we just had to escape because there was more and more like bad guys coming onto the map. We were trying to hold them off so Demo Dave could catch us up, but he just couldn't catch us up. He was just really unfortunate with what was happening, and then like Demo Dave just became like he was just the fall guy. If it was like he was just like he's not doing anything. He's here to be left alone. He's here to like just take away attention so that everyone else can go away. So in this not campaign, because it was different missions, but we would just take Demo Dave, and he just, no one cared if he didn't make it. He didn't. That's fine. That's Demo Dave's job is just to die for the cause, to be left behind, to be captured by the Gestapo. Like, so that was pretty cool. That's pretty fun. But there's also like a light version, so you can get like narrative or like campaign light. There's a really good board game that I play quite a lot with the wife called Journeys in Middle Earth, which is a Lord of the Rings kind of a co-op adventure game, and it's got an app that you can use. You can either use your computer or use your phone or an iPad or whatever, and that's really cool because that's got storytelling. It's got a narrative, and like your character grows and develops through that. So there are lots of opportunities to do it in different ways. And so, like saying about how it's mostly me, it was good to play that with the wife because the app took on a lot of the campaign stuff. So then we both were just enjoying it, and we both were immersed in it because the app was doing all the bookkeeping and the hard work in the background, and we were just enjoying it. And some people are super anti-app games, and I get that, games with supporting apps, because if the supporting app goes away, then you can't play the game anymore. And I get that. And some people don't like involving electronics in the game experience, but what I found with that was it was really good because I didn't have to do all the bookkeeping. Like when you play campaign games and things like that, there's a certain amount of bookkeeping that's involved. Whereas if you play with an app, that kind of did a lot of the bookkeeping. But yeah, man. But stories in games is what it's all about, man. And coming up with stories with the little plastic guys, and learning to love them, learning to hate them, learning to be disappointed with them, learning to expect to be disappointed by them. Being shocked when they actually do something good for once, being shocked when they do something bad for once, creating some sort of completely non-realistic expectations. So like it's like that. I forget what the actual term is, but is it the gambler's fallacy? Is it something like that? So like if you got a dice and you roll a 1 3 times, you might think there's no chance I'm rolling a 1 again. But there's the exact same chance of rolling a 1 again than there was the first time. Just because I've rolled three ones does not necessarily mean that I won't roll a 1 the next time. There's still the exact same chance that I'll roll a 1. Does that kind of make sense? But like,
yeah,
I think
those are independent events.
But for some reason, I guess this is why, and I'm not taking a pop at religion, but I guess that's why a lot of people believe in religion. I'm not saying that I don't, because we try to assign some sort of power to random occurrence. Does that kind of make sense? So it's like, you got a character like Reggie. Like Reggie was, it just happened. But in my head, it didn't just happen. In my head, it was always going to happen. Does that kind of make sense? But it wasn't. So yeah, I think we're naturally drawn as human beings to those stories and those narratives. I think we want to believe, right? Was that X-Files?
Cool. It's been a really good chat, though, Dan. I've really enjoyed it. Any closing thoughts for the listener?
No, not really. No. Hopefully people have found it interesting, somewhat. I'd be interested again. Like, I'm not sitting here like some sort of sage that kind of knows it all. Like, I'm just as interested. In fact, no, I'm more interested to hear about what other people think than what I do, to be honest. So if anyone's got any thoughts about any of the stuff that we talked about, like, I want to read it. I want to listen to it. I want to hear it because yeah, that's what makes it more interesting. Someone's probably got some better ideas than we have about how to do this stuff. Somebody's probably got, or many people have got more experience than we have of this sort of stuff, So just because you're not here now talking doesn't mean that your insight isn't valid. So yeah, let us know, talk to us, speak to us, because I'd like to hear it.
Big thanks to Dan for joining me on the podcast. And as I said before, this is part one of a 2-part conversation. We discussed another topic as well, so that'll be going out in the feed in the coming weeks. Just one last thing to mention, we're getting towards the end of the month. I need your question of the month answers in bedroombattlefields.com/voicemail. Tell me all about your hobby highlights of 2024. What did you paint? Did you take some to the next level? Did you try a new game? Or did you go to an event or even host an event that you really enjoyed? Whatever your highlights were this year, tell us all about them by going to bedroombattlefields.com/voicemail. Alright, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll speak again on the next one.